Governor Scott Walker from the beautiful state of Wisconsin on all of that. Governor, always great to have you.
Thanks, Neil.
On this issue, and I caught your comments when you came out of the White House, and the feeling seems to be that there's like a dare moment that Republicans are entertaining to put forth a measure to repeal Obamacare once and for all, have it go to the president, he will sign it, and it's a done deal. But a lot of Republicans have problems with that, but it seems that this approach would be, we dare you to vote this thing down. Is that the approach they're taking? And if it is, what do you think of that?
Well, we're going to give deference to the president's comments tomorrow in front of the joint session of the Congress. But I got to tell you, first off, it's great to have a president and administration that actually want to work with governors. You know, the president said he wanted to take power out of Washington and send it back to the people. One of the best ways to do that is to work with our states, which are more effective, more efficient, more accountable. And on this issue, probably more than any others, we know, we see it every day. We feel for the citizens of our state, Obamacare doesn't work. It is a collapsing enterprise right now. Even my neighbor Mark Dayton, the Democrat, said late last year the Affordable Care Act is no longer affordable. So we know it is falling apart. Politically, it'd be great to say, keep it. Let's keep it for the next 2 years and show the American people how bad it is as people lose coverage. But as the president said again this morning to governors, that's not the right thing to do. We need to fix it for the American people, regardless of whether it'd be better politically for us to just show how wrong it is. We need to fix it, and that's what governors are doing, working with this president, working with this vice president, working with their administration. We're going to get it fixed, and you're going to get the first preview on Tuesday. And then later in the week, we're going to roll out the plan that governors have been working on that we think can be a part of not only the administration's efforts, but the House and the Senate bill as well.
Is it fair to say that the plan the governor's been working on would apply to all the states or just be tailor-made for each state?
Well, it would affect everyone in the nation, but it would give the flexibility. So, you know, we have, just amongst Republican governors, we have 33 Republican governors. 2/3 of the nation have Republican governors. We have some governors who took the expansion, some who inherited the expansion, some like me who did not take the expansion. But we need to make it work for every American. And for all the hype and hysteria of those on the left, Obamacare doesn't work. That is clear, and in fact, it only covers a sliver. If you're watching right now and you get your health insurance from your employer, you're not going to be affected. If you get your health insurance under Medicare, you're not going to be affected. Only a sliver of people actually got their health insurance over Obamacare, and in turn what it did was drove up rates, in fact, like I said, in Minnesota, by almost 67%. That is unsustainable for those families and those people. We want to have access to personalized, patient-centered health care that treats people like human beings, not like a number or statistic, and we can do that working together. We've got to replace and reform this plan to make it work better for the American people.
But how quickly between the two, Governor? I mean, whatever you do to repeal it and then replace it, what is that gap? What do you think that gap should be? It sounds to me, and I could be mishearing this from the White House, that they want to quickly get and recommend a repeal effort, a repeal vote, put all Republicans on notice, repeal this thing, and then come up with a replacement. But I'm not quite sure of the time frame.
You got to do it together, because the uncertainty we heard is similar to the uncertainty we saw in 2009 when Obamacare first came around. A lot of Americans were scared and concerned about what was going to happen then. Many Americans are concerned about what may or may not be happening going forward. So I think it's not just enough to repeal. We have to have a reasonable plan to replace, and equally, if not more importantly, to reform things.
But that replacement, that I guess comes back to haunt folks, right? I mean, because this is fairly expensive to provide the 20+ million with the insurance that they do have, whether it's a sliver or not. So whatever you replace it with would be, as some conservatives argue within your own party, Governor, with government albatross light. It is still the risk being a potential government albatross. What do you say?
We can make this work. It's why since the beginning of the year, governors have been together. We get on conference calls sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. We were all together over the weekend. We've had our staffs working on it almost 24/7. We are problem solvers. We get things done. We've got a plan that we believe will help both the administration and the House and the Senate bridge this gap of bringing this together so that we can actually get moving forward and get on beyond the repeal. The repeal's got to happen, not just politically because people made the promise, but more importantly because it is falling apart. If you left it the way it is right now, you'd see thousands upon thousands of people losing coverage because, as we see, provider after provider, we've got some states where there's hardly any areas that have even people offering it under the exchange. That is unacceptable for the people in Wisconsin or the people across this great country. We've got a better way forward, and I hope they'll look at things like what we've done in Wisconsin. In my state, And we're the only state that didn't take the expansion that literally has no insurance gap. We covered everyone in poverty for the first time ever. Republican, Democrat, nobody's done it ever before. For all those above poverty, we helped transition them into the marketplace. With this new plan, we can help all those people who gain access to the exchange. We can help them with an alternative, with the credit and the assistance they need to go forward, and still long-term lower the cost curve, bend that cost curve going forward, because for adults, not people with disabilities, not seniors, but for adults who are in the workforce, who are able to work, who are under Medicaid, that's where we provide the real reform to get them back up on their feet again, back into the workforce, no longer dependent on the government. That's the true sense of independence.
You know, Governor, we're getting a sense that the president, when he prioritized his budget tomorrow, it'll call for about $54 billion in more defense spending. He will not touch entitlements as we know them, Medicare and Social Security. I know there are many people who get that and pay into that and argue it's not an entitlement to them. It's something they paid into. Be that as it may, it's about 70% of a budget that would be off bounds for the president. What do you think of that?
Well, I think overall it's incredibly important. I was just in Afghanistan during the holidays to visit troops, as I did in several other places around the world. Folks from Wisconsin, as well as other troops I met, know desperately we need to have a new commitment to our military to keep them safe and to see them be able to fulfill their mission and get out and get back home and get back on with things. So I love the fact that General Mattis is there. I think he's having an incredible influence on this president and vice president. I think that's really powerful. On top of that, the real area to look at is growth and reform. Growth, we just talked about it with the Secretary of the Treasury this morning. A reasonable middle-class tax cut combined with helping employers bring down the tax rate so it's comparable with the rest of the industrialized world, bring American jobs back from overseas, have fair and free trade together so that we can trade with others, but they get the same deal going in, so it truly is free, so that American workers can compete with anyone in the world. I think you see that kind of growth, 3-4%, I think is not out of the reach of potential out there. And then reform that has to be a collaboration with our states and our local governments to help people who previously have been on some form of government assistance like welfare, particularly in areas like Medicaid. Not touching Medicare, not touching Social Security, but with Medicaid, reform it so we help transition those people into the workplace. States can do that. We've been doing that for years in Wisconsin. It can be done elsewhere across the country.
Real quickly, Governor, I know you got to go, but are you surprised the popularity the president is enjoying with unions, with the Teamsters, with even an AFL-CIO official who was quoting that because of President Trump, they've exacted concessions and Ford is rethinking a lot of its priorities, that so far, not across the board, but union leaders seem to like this Republican president? I know you've had your run-ins with unions, but what do you make of that?
Although, Neil, the funny thing is I had it with the big government union bosses. With the union members, even in my recall election years ago, nearly 40% of them, according to one exit poll, voted for me in the recall. Why? Because they want to work. We put people back to work. More people are employed in my state last year than at any point in our history of our state. Unemployment's at a 16-year low. You got a president who's looking out for the forgotten man and woman of this country. It's certainly what I saw in Wisconsin. A lot of people who felt abandoned by the federal government now feel they have a champion to put more Americans back to work. That's exactly what we need. We need somebody to get the power out of Washington, send it back to the American people, and that's why they like this president. And the more they hear, and the more importantly, not just hearing, but seeing. Actions speak louder than words. The true judge of this presidency is going to be the work he gets done. And as governors, we're committed to working with this president and this administration to get good things done for the people we represent.
Governor Walker, thank you very much. Good seeing you again.
Thank you, Neil. Good to see you as always.